We all live in the real world. We're talking, as you just said, about bringing potentially criminal charges against a former president of the United States and a future candidate for president of the United States. Given that, it seems to me, just on a purely human level, if you were Merrick Garland or Jack Smith, you would want your case to be absolutely nailed down. You would want it to have, in your mind at least, the near certainty of conviction before you proceeded.
Last night, the U.S. Congressional Committee investigating the attack on the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. in January the 6th last year, they decided that Donald Trump, the former president, should face charges for insurrection. What now? Let's talk to Niall Stanage, the White House columnist at The Hill. Niall, hi.
Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, well, thank you for joining us. So now the special prosecutor put in place by the Justice Department, Jack Smith, he is now in the spotlight. Tell us a bit about Jack Smith and his role.
So Jack Smith, first of all, I think his role is the more important point in terms of where we are right now. He was appointed by the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and the idea is that the appointment of a special counsel provides a sort of layer of insulation from political influence. Once former President Trump declared his candidacy for 2024, there was then obviously the perception that actions taken by the Biden Department of Justice could impede Trump and help Biden. So Jack Smith was appointed to provide, as I say, a level of protection from that charge or from that allegation. He's a career prosecutor. He has worked on some very high-profile cases. He has worked in the realm of international criminal cases, war crimes, and so forth. So he's a very respected figure, I would say, by and large.
Right. Now, and we've already seen from Donald Trump and those who support Donald Trump, they've criticized this entire process as politically motivated, a political hit job. Does Jack Smith's record, does his CV enable him to rebut that charge? Is his independence clearly established?
It is, I think, by any fair-minded person. The unfortunate thing, John, is that we're in a moment in the United States where there are unfair-minded people, by which I mean that we're in such a hyper-polarized time that I think there is a segment of the population that would consider any probe at all by anyone into former President Trump to be politically motivated. Now, in Jack Smith's case itself, I think he himself has remained outside of any obvious partisan taint. Now, there is some suggestion that I think his wife has either contributed to Democrats or was involved in producing a Michelle Obama documentary, if I'm recalling correctly, but he himself is not politically aligned in any obvious or apparent way.
Right. And in a nutshell, where do we go from here? Does Jack Smith conduct his investigation and then recommend whether there should be a prosecution? And if that time comes, is it ultimately up to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, to make the final call?
It is ultimately up to the Attorney General. Now, I would say that if Jack Smith were to not recommend charges, it would, as a political matter, be very difficult for Merrick Garland to countermand that and bring charges, because then what we're talking about, the complaint of political taint, would become very relevant. But yes, Jack Smith takes over the investigation from where it was. He can marshal all the evidence that he wishes to. He then makes a decision that he sends to Merrick Garland, and we proceed from there.
And is it purely then, ultimately, a prosecutorial decision on whether the balance of the evidence would lead to a conviction, or does politics play a part, even in the form of weighing up what's in the public interest to prosecute or not, given we're talking about a former president and possibly a presidential contender for the next job in the White House?
It's a great question, John. If you listen to the Department of Justice, they would say, well, we follow the law where it goes, we follow the evidence where it goes. We all live in the real world. We're talking, as you just said, about bringing potentially criminal charges against a former president of the United States and a future candidate for president of the United States. Given that, it seems to me, just on a purely human level, if you were Merrick Garland or Jack Smith, you would want your case to be absolutely nailed down. You would want it to have in your mind at least, the near certainty of conviction before you proceeded. Because if you proceeded through all the rigmarole, all the divisiveness that goes with bringing such a charge, and former President Trump was ultimately acquitted, it would be pretty terrible on a number of levels.
Niall, really good to get your take. Thank you. Niall Stanage there, columnist at The Hill.